Hi everybody. It is great to share again. Previously, we reflected on the fact that our lives and our country and our businesses many times suffer from a crisis of expectation. That place where we operate, where there's a disjunct between promises and visions and prophecies over our lives, over our businesses and over our families and our current reality. We spoke about the door to enter through in order to make that reality a truth in our lives is the door of conflict. And we spoke about that door of conflict opening and we having to walk through this tunnel of chaos in order to get to God's revealed truth over our lives. We anchored our discussion in Isaiah 58, where there are two components to Isaiah 58. The first component is a promise where God says God's people will be known as those that can fix anything. Just imagine that you can be known as a person in your workplace, in community, in your marriage, in your family, as someone that can fix anything. But then Isaiah 58 is very clear that it is a process. It is a process of building. Isaiah says it is taking from the past and building anew and afresh from the past something that is real and something that is whole. We then spoke about the story of examples of Genesis 34, the story where the inability to deal with conflict actually wrecked an entire city. Today we're going to focus on one of the characters in that story of Genesis 34, the character of Dinah. Dinah is the only daughter of Jacob. The Dinah is a daughter that's 16 years old. She wants to explore the world. She wants to get out there. She wants to experience life. And Scripture says that she leaves the safety of her home and she goes into the city unescorted. And then a terrible thing happens to her. And many times there are relationships that we are in that we are just so struggling with because there is a spirit of an abuse of freedom in the person that we're dealing with. Many times it's in our children. Many times it's in a business environment where the person that you're dealing with, you are struggling to get through, you are struggling to deal with that relationship because there's freedom that we give them, but then there's an abuse of that freedom. Proverbs 28:19 in the New King James Version gives us a hint as to how to deal with that spirit of the abuse of freedom. The scripture says the following: where there is a lack of revelation, people cast off restraint. Where there's a lack of revelation, people cast off restraint. So how is that made practical in our lives? My son and I, he's 18 years old, drove back from a shooting expedition in the woods, and we realized that there's something in his life, being in a university at this point in time, where he's struggling with what's happening in the hostels and in the reses, where there's the spirit of promiscuity, the spirit of a lack of restraint. And I knew that I had to speak with him about it, but it was like this door that I had to open in what was just an amazing weekend together. The door of conflict that I had to open. And we were sitting in the car, and just very quickly I said, "Son, you spoke with Mom about the things that are happening at university, the things that kids do and the boys and the girls do, and they speak about it as if it's nothing. Do you think it's right?" I asked him. And he said, "No, it's not right." And I was just immediately happy about the outcome of that discussion. But the Spirit prompted me to go further. The Spirit prompted me to ask the question, why? So I asked, "Andreas, why do you think God says that it is not right to have an intimate sexual relationship before you are married?" And his answer was, "Well, because." And I pushed further and I said, you have to have an answer to the why question, not just the what question. We pushed through and he pushed through. He got frustrated, I got frustrated. And in the end, exasperated, he shouted out, "Dad, sex before marriage is wrong because sex is not a sport." And something clicked in his life. There was a revelation in his life about the purity and the reality of a emotional relationship that goes over into a physical relationship within the bounds of what God has created to be a trusting relationship between man and woman. And because he had this revelation, I could start speaking into his life. And I said, you are absolutely right. It is not a sport, because when you meet a girl and when you walk together and when you talk together and you become the best of best friends, that place where it is just so natural to take the next step, that next step is taken in marriage. Why? Because you can explore together, you can work together, you can live together, because you trust each other implicitly within the bond of love between you and your wife and God. Where there is a revelation, the spirit of freedom, the abuse of freedom can be dealt with. Sitting in the bakkie on the way home, there was a bit of a model that transpired in a way that we can deal with those types of relationships. The first thing that happened in the bakkie was I spoke God's absolute truth into a situation. That is the first step. Speak God's truth. But then take the next step to say why. Because what we do many times with our kids that just break relationships even further is we take God's truth and we ram it down their throats. You take God's truth and you ram it down the throat of your colleague. But prompting the question as to why that is the truth starts a conversation, starts relationship, starts something that is healing of nature as opposed to an authoritarian statement. Asking the question why. And then stepping in as a parent, as an employer, as a husband, and praying for a revelation of God's truth in that person's life. A revelation that hooks that why into their being, into their hearts, and that can sustain them through very difficult circumstances. And then in the last situation, many times that revelation, the person that you're dealing with is not in a situation to be able to link into that revelation. Maybe they're too young. And at that point in time, you as parent have the right to step in until such time as God has revealed himself to them. That spirit of the abuse of freedom, if that is the door of conflict that you need to open, in order to navigate with God that tunnel of chaos, the process may help you. The process of saying, what is God's truth? Always speak God's truth. Secondly, asking the question why that is the truth. Praying God's word, Proverbs 29 verse 18, for a revelation into the person's life. And then, where there are circumstances where revelation is not right for that person, you step in. I pray that we will be able to solve for and heal relationships that are broken at this point in time. Husband-wife relationships, son-daughter relationships. Something that can work in our relationships to heal, because we are able to deal with a conflict that results from a spirit of the abuse of freedom.